Okay, hey, and welcome everybody to this episode of Sage Wisdom. I'm Cassandra the Saffron Sage, and today we're here with Ellie of Saturn Season Astrology and Let's F with Astrology. And she is here, and we are going to talk all about the asteroids that and the contacts that we use in synastry, in relationships, in astrology readings. So stay tuned. This should be a very fun episode. And thank you so much, Ellie, for coming and joining us and coming back on the channel again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So for anyone who doesn't know, Ellie did do we did a show already on the Galactic Center. If you have not watched that, you guys need to go right after this and watch that video because it is so cool and it is so much fun. That being said, we're going to talk about relationship asteroids mainly today and hopefully, educate you guys all on asteroids. And I really wanted to start by introducing the concept of asteroids because I think that they're fun and they're exciting and they're just like more flavors than planets have, and you can Google them pretty easily. So they're a great like sort of intro to when you're learning astrology. But there are some misconceptions about asteroids, and I think that it's easy for people to give them a little bit more power than they have. And so I guess I'll start by asking you, Ellie, what is your take on how to use asteroids?
Well, and I'll say, like, this is just my personal, if anybody works with them, I'm not saying you're wrong. This is just how I like to stick to conjunctions primarily. I feel like they're the most dynamic connection. They're going to blend the most with conjunctions to a natal planet. Let me clarify that. Now, if you've got like a cluster conjunction of multiple asteroids all together, okay, maybe I might pay more attention to that. But I generally like to look at asteroid conjunctions to planets, or to something like the nodes, or some of the more major things, or Chiron. Even Chiron is an asteroid, but that's a big one. Yeah,
That's true.
Yeah, Chiron is. That's a big one. That's kind of, Chiron is not a planet, but I do think of it as, in my frame of reference, I know it's not a planet, but it's so important that I do think of it or give it importance like a planet. But yeah, generally the conjunctions are what I will stick to. And I like to use it. I like to use an orb, maybe 3 degrees for some applying and separating, usually about 2, really tight.
Yep, same here. And I'm almost exactly the same as you in terms of the fact that, to me, asteroids are, you can get a little information from like the sign and the house an asteroid is in your own natal chart. But really, it's the conjunctions that are going to give us that, like, that's when they infuse their energy into that planet that's already there. And that's what I look for in synastry as well, is the asteroid, with the exception of Isis and Osiris, which I'll talk about later. But mostly it's going to be, that asteroid, is it conjunct something? And that's when it's like super significant. And I would say the same thing even for like fixed stars as well, just because they're in the same place in everyone's chart. Like they're always in the same spot. So if it doesn't aspect something, then it's not a significant one for you personally.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that for sure.
So now that like everyone kind of knows what page we're on with asteroids, we can go ahead and like go through just some of the different asteroids that are the most significant that we look for when we're doing like synastry readings in relationships, or even just the topic of love and romance in general. So do you want to start with like one of the first ones that you have chosen?
Okay, well, I do. There's one. Okay, and with asteroids, sometimes the spelling will be a little off. Sometimes the spelling will be a little screwy. Like, okay, there's one called Destin, and it's spelled Destinn. I don't know why they didn't put a fucking Y there. Sorry, probably shouldn't swear out. Sorry, I don't know why they didn't put a Y. I forget where I am sometimes. They should have put a Y there, but it is supposed to be like a destiny-like asteroid. And it's number 6583. And it tends to deal with things that feel destined, right? So like if you have your destined asteroid conjunct somebody's, I don't know, say sun, this union might feel a little bit more destined in some way. I think it's a fun one to play with anyway. Another one that is fun is union itself. Union is 1585. And it can also show like the same kind of thing, just from like less of a karmic way or a soul tying way, but like, would this person perhaps make a good partner in a union for you, kind of thing.
Do you feel like these two are only useful in relationships that are romantic, or do you find that like maybe like do you ever see those connections in like parents and children, or other kinds of relationships?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because totally. Yeah. The union relation, you just kind of have to tailor the way that like you think about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you're not thinking about like a romantic union. You're thinking about it like a parent-child bond, which is a union in and of it. It certainly can be, so yeah, you could totally use it. You just have to shift how you're looking at it, or in friendships, shift how you're looking at it,
Right. Well, and that's something I've found as well in like synastry with people who aren't like, it's not a romantic situation. It's like some other kind of connection. And a lot of these asteroids will show up too, but it's just not necessarily always. Some of them I think are more sexual in nature. But a lot of this stuff, it can kind of be interpreted, like you said, in a way that is non-romantic as well. So it can be multi-layered for sure.
Yes. And that's actually when I do synastry work for people, I always like to ask before I do the work, what kind of relationship is this? I always like to ask, because sometimes, I don't want to start talking about how it looks like you all would have great sexual chemistry when it's like just your, like your good friend and you're like, what? I like to.
Exactly.
So yeah. And sometimes it can be a little, you kind of like, this could maybe go a bunch of different ways. So what exactly is going on? And some people don't just offer that up. They don't just want to.
It's funny. Yeah, it's funny you say that, because I have learned that as well. That, because sometimes people want synastry reading with someone who they just feel a strong connection with, and they're in a relationship with someone else. They just want to understand why they feel this way.
Yeah, feel this drama or this something, yes, to this, yes.
Mm-hmm. And it's sometimes, as an astrologer, I find it a little bit challenging to kind of I always want to try to kind of be really clear in how I'm explaining things, because just because someone has soulmate connection to you does not mean you're going to live happily ever after.
Oh yes. Your soulmate connections can be a massive pain in your ass. But they can also be lovely, but they can also, there's this romanticized ideal of what a soulmate is. And I think anyway, and it's sometimes they're difficult relationships, but you are supposed to learn something, but
Right. And so something can be really lit up in a chart and be like, wow, this is such a crazy soulmate situation. But then in real life, it's filled with tons of challenges and situations that kind of bring you to your knees. And so I always try to clarify, what do I mean by the word soulmate? Or, what a fated connection is, right? Those fated ones are, fate isn't always kind,
No,
fate isn't always easy.
No, it's not. And often, I mean, there can be some that are just absolutely wonderful and lovely. And it feels like you're coming home, and then there are some that that you've known this person before, but they are just a massive thorn in your side,
Totally. That's funny. Okay, so let's talk about some more. I'm going to do one that's on my list, which is Juno. So this is one that I'm always going to look at for synastry. This is also one that I find useful for natal chart readings too. If you're just looking at your own sort of, what you want in a partner, because it's the asteroid of marriage. And it's oftentimes what you look for in a partner, or what you need from a partner, or what you could possibly commit to. Now, of course, some people have charts that lend themselves to being less committed, but even those people who are maybe not ever going to get married, perhaps, would find themselves in a long-term relationship based on, that Juno, the sign and house of that Juno being like a compatibility factor, but then also it can also be used just like all the other ones that we're talking about, where if it's conjunct a natal planet in synastry especially, then that's going to be definitely someone you would be more likely to be committed to, unless it had some other really funky aspects going on with it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yeah, Juno is an important one to look at in this kind of thing. And I know you mentioned Ceres too.
Yes.
I think Ceres can be important too. I know you mentioned like self-love, certainly can be. I could even see, depending on what the rest of the chart looked like how it could be how you nurture another person, specifically like if your Ceres say conjuncted their Venus.
Totally.
You could really be I think we tend to, and I do this too, kind of tend to think of Ceres as more like mothering kind of nurturing, but it can, and sometimes that nurturing in relationships might not always be a good thing. Sometimes it might be a wonderful thing, but yeah.
Yeah, totally. I totally think of Ceres as how you nurture. I use that a lot too in natal charts for like how you nurture yourself or what you need. I even read a career astrology book that talked about how Ceres can actually be a career indicator of like what you need, like, because it's like what you need, one of the things you need, it's almost like a little teeny side moon if you think about it, because the moon really does represent like what we innately need as well.
My moon is conjunct Ceres.
Oh, okay.
They're like within a degree.
Interesting.
So it's interesting to bring up the moon. But yeah, but I can see where you're going with that, with how you nurture yourself, even with career. And I can see that. Uh-huh.
Like what you need to be nurtured, and like, what house it lands in, kind of giving a little bit more on like how aware you are of that need or not, and then aspects and everything. I really like working with Ceres, especially because whenever I'm doing a natal and we're talking about needs and like how you eat and how, whether you get enough sleep, Ceres always just kind of works its way into the conversation as like a supporting factor. And so I can see though how it can be used in relationships, because if we have trouble with our own self-nurturing, that's going to definitely show up in a relationship. And then also sometimes the way we nurture is weird and different, but then that other person, it just fits for them, right? Like that's part of what makes relationships compatible. And maybe it doesn't work for like 90% of people, but that one person it does work for, or whatever the case is.
Yes, it fits just right for them. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever work with Vesta in this context?
Okay, so I like Vesta, but I haven't used it a lot in relationships. But why don't you tell us more about Vesta?
Well, Vesta's so private and like sacred sexuality and things of that nature. Not just anybody was allowed in Vesta's temple with the mythology, for the mythology. Oh, and before I continue on, anybody that's curious about any asteroids or whatever, totally look into the mythology on this stuff, because it'll help kind of give you, that way you can have your own spin on what you think these things mean. You know what I think it's a fun thing to incorporate anyway, being able to play with that. But when I see Vesta can be looked at, and I think it can be looked at in synastry for sure. But I do think that it's this place, right? Because it is so sacred to us in the natal chart, that when it's hit in synastry, depending on what else is going on, that may not be a person that you want to let into Vesta's temple.
Oh, okay.
Do you know what like? Sometimes it might feel more invasive.
Okay, so you're saying if Vesta makes contact with that other person's planets?
It could, depending on what else is going on in the synastry. Now, I've also seen it not look like that, but because Vesta is so sacred and personal to us, right? It's not something that you just want anybody and everybody to enter, so to speak. So depending on, there might be some difficult person that you may not really like that has some contact that, like, let's say their Mars was conjunct your Vesta. That might feel really bad. It might, it might feel more like this person is trying to be more aggressive in getting into your temple, whatever you want to think of as the temple here, whatever kind of but you know what I mean? Like trying to get into your private world, trying to get into what is sacred to you. that may not feel as good. Somebody that let's say you have an easy relationship with, they've got their Venus conjunct your Vesta, that could feel really nice.
Okay. You might like give them special treatment, like they're allowed in where other people aren't, kind of a thing.
Perhaps. And I mean, even with Mars is more aggressive, but perhaps you really like that person with Mars conjunct your Vesta and you might be like, let's go, So.
Okay. That's cool. So it's like special love, sacred love.
That's kind of how I think of it. Yes. Because when I think of Vesta and like sexuality, it is more like self-contained, if you will. But, so yeah, anybody that you're going to let into that world is they're going to need to pass some kind of a test or what have you. What have you. They're going to have to be special people to you. Yeah.
That makes sense. Okay, cool. Well, that's interesting. Do you have any others on your list?
I do. Let's see. Okay. So there's, and I'm going to pronounce these wrong. There's Circe or Circe and Hecate. I know I'm pronouncing that wrong. When I think of Hecate, I think of Tecate beer. Stupid. But so I know I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. I think of those. Okay, so those are like witchy asteroids.
Mm-hmm.
I think of those like if you happen to have your Hecate or your Circe conjunct somebody else's, I don't know, let's say their sun or something. There might be something about you that they find kind of bewitching, if you will.
Okay. So in like a mystified kind of way or more of like a
magical.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I guess depending on what else is going on, it could go in like a not so great direction, but I do find that there's like a magical, mystical quality that the planet person might feel about the asteroid person.
Oh, okay. So they might feel like enchanted, like
perhaps.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. This is good to know.
It's a fun thing to play around, with anyway.
That is fun. That does sound fun.
Why don't you talk about Isis and Osiris?
Yeah. Okay. So Isis and Osiris are ones that I love using, and I use these ones a little bit differently. I don't have like a signification for Isis or for Osiris. It's more of like, if these points make contact with each other in synastry in any way, that means something very significant. And it's kind of like a soulmate indicator, which we sort of alluded to earlier, how soulmates can be hard or easy. But a lot of people who get married or who have long-term relationships, their Isis and Osiris will be in some kind of relationship, like Isis trine something, or Isis trine their Osiris, or Osiris on a planet or an angle. So I do include with those the aspects, which I normally don't for asteroids, but on these ones I do, just because they're just so powerful, and they're so, I mean, it's such a, like, I think of it as like a marker of like, yes, this is definitely a relationship that is more on the meant to be side. Now, whether it's going to last or not, that's something we can't really tell. I can't really tell that with any asteroids, right? I mean, maybe some Saturn aspects might stabilize, or enough Earth in a composite chart might stabilize a relationship a little bit more. But yeah, I think Isis and Osiris are really kind of these special relationship indicators.
Yeah, I could see that. I could see that being the case. I can't remember. I'm trying to think if I know off the top of my head where any of mine were in any pivotal relationships. There's probably something though going on there.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't have astrology yet when I was in the major relationships that I had. So it's sad I can't go see. I can't go back and look. I don't know their info, but we can go to whatever you have next on your list if you want to.
Okay. Okay. I like to look at Eros and Psyche.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Which are kind of, a pairing like Isis and Osiris.
Right.
I like to see if there's any kind of, planetary contacts, like I could probably widen that though, and actually look at the other aspects, between the two. But I do stick with conjunctions here too. but I like to see if there's any contacts there. And Eros, just in general, I mean, if something conjunct somebody's Eros, there's probably some kind of sexual attraction going on, which
Right, because isn't Eros like erotic love? Like
Yeah.
isn't that what it means?
yes.
And then how is Psyche connected to Eros? I always hear them talked about as a couple, Eros and Psyche, Eros and Psyche.
Eros, okay. Eros and Psyche. I believe she was, it's been a couple months since I've looked into the actual mythology. I believe she was married to him. I believe she was married to him. Yes. Or she wanted to get, I should look that up.
It's okay. It's okay. So they were like a couple somehow.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And his mother, I believe, didn't really like her. And then she did something that pissed him off. Their relationship was kind of screwed up.
Okay.
As I remember, it was kind of a screwy relationship. It wasn't like, it wasn't as, it wasn't totally nice, but they are like connected. So you do want to look at them together in a chart.
Okay. And then do you feel like that not nice stuff gets infused into it, or it can still be like an okay, like, is it a red flag if those connect, or can there still be a positive way that expresses?
I think those kind of relationships, like there's probably going to be a little bit of difficulty, probably going to be a little bit of ease. You're probably going to see a little bit of both. A lot of depth, though. I would say there's a lot of depth to them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
That would be, yeah. Yeah. That's kind of how I've always thought of it anyway.
Is it almost like Pluto contacts where it's like there's an intensity, but it's not always good?
Yeah. Maybe a little less intense, but Pluto's like so super intense. I kind of feel like there's much that's more intense than Pluto.
Totally.
But yeah, there is an intensity to it. Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. That's good to know.
Okay. There's actually an asteroid called Yes.
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 Okay.
Like yes.
Oh, YES. Yes.
Yes. Yes. But you could be, I mean, I'm kind of joking, but it might be kind of a fun thing to pull if you're like really into somebody and like the asteroid Yes happens to fall on their moon. Yeah.
That's funny. Okay.
It's number 7707. I just think it's kind of like shaking an 8-ball, you know. There's not a lot in astrology that feels that way, but this particular thing does. This particular aspect.
That's fun.
Chiron and Chiron.
Mm-hmm.
I do like to look at them because that was his wife, or his partner. I've actually seen her just kind of mentioned as his partner, not actually his wife. I've also seen it mentioned that they had several children together, and then some parts of mythology say they didn't have children together. So I'm not totally clear on it. That's the issue. I will say this. That's the issue with mythology, because there are a lot of things that don't totally line up when you read, you know what I mean? So, but she's very healing. She can be very healing to her. They don't actually say this, but I figure anybody that's going to be with Chiron is going to be healing in some way, right? Like I can't imagine that he wouldn't have a partner that wasn't.
Right.
Just because he was wounded himself. She's kind of like, but I do like to look at these two together in synastry and just happen to see if anybody, like, I don't know, if your Chiron conjuncts somebody's something, and then they're like, okay, let's say your Chiron conjuncts somebody's moon, and then their moon conjuncts your Chariklo. Some kind of connection like that, I think, can be kind of cool.
Do you think that would be like a relationship where the two people kind of heal each other in a way? Like that's the idea there?
I think that's very possible. Or there's something at least healing about whether or not they're completely healed. I don't know. But there is a healing involved with those relationships. I would think.
That makes sense.
Yes. So I do like to look at them for sure. Karma. There's asteroid Karma. 3811. I wouldn't like look at this and just see this, right, and be like, oh, there's karmic ties. No, I'd want to see stuff to the nodes, stuff to Pluto, stuff, you know what I mean? But I think it can be a really, like, if you're looking at a synastry chart and you're like, these people might have some kind of tie, right? And let's say the karma asteroid happens to be conjunct something very important. Like, let's say the planetary ruler of one person's south node or something. Okay. This might kind of push me over to, okay, there's something going on here.
Right. So do you interpret it as like this is a karmic relationship if that asteroid is significant?
Yeah. Yes, probably I would be inclined to, or something like you're supposed to learn something from this person.
Yeah. Another not always fun one.
Yeah, it may not be. It might be more difficult, or it might be something where you might be two souls that decided to just meet up again, and it's, there's nothing wrong with, you get along, everything's fine, could really go either way, but some kind of tie to somewhere else, something else.
That makes sense. Definitely.
Yeah. The child asteroid.
Oh, okay.
It's 4580. It can, I've always thought of this one as like inner child stuff. So, depending on what's conjunct it, right? And if somebody in somebody else's chart in synastry, if your inner child say need healing and their moon was there conjunct each other, that could be really nice, right? Something say like Uranus conjunct their child, your child asteroid may or may not, might feel more spastic or more electrifying, just kind of depends. But I do like to look at that. Let me see. And there are also some like Valentine.
Oh, yeah.
Valentine is 447. You could look at that for romantic connections. If somebody's planet conjunct your Valentine or vice versa. Same thing for Amor. That's 1221. And then there's also in the same vein of like where was it? Okay, there's also Spirit in the same vein of karma. 37452, that's the number. These can show some interesting connections sometimes too in synastry. People that you feel also tied to in some way. I've noticed that to be the case. So yeah, I think those are all the ones that I actually have on the list. These are the biggest ones that I would work with in this context. The only other thing are the names.
Right. Yes.
Oh, and the sun moon midpoint.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll go with the names. I'll go with the names first.
Sure.
Okay, so you can pull name asteroids in a chart. And you might have to play with the name a little bit. Like for my name, for Ellie, I have to there's not an ELLIE asteroid, but there is an ELLY. So that's what I go with. Sometimes you might have to go with like a derivative or a very similar thing, kind of like with destiny, being destined, right? You go with what's close. You could do the same thing with like I don't know like the other translations of names, but I do know there are people that have gone with German names for their own name, people that have gone with like Spanish names for their, whatever. You can, however you want to do that, But looking at those in synastry can be really cool, seeing how they, like if let's say your name asteroid in your chart, in your own chart, happens to conjunct, I don't know, somebody's Mars. It could make them really light up something in you or be driven towards you. So that, kind of something like that. I think they're a fun thing to incorporate. You can even incorporate these in your own natal chart for sure. Like see where your own name. Okay, like I have a friend and he has many names that he goes by, right? And I noticed that his legal first name, the asteroid for his legal first name, is conjunct his ascendant.
Wow.
And I'm like, thinking about, I asked him, I said, why are you not going by this?
That's so funny.
I'm like, you've got all these other names. Why are you not going? Like, seriously, if my name if my legal name Ariel was conjunct my ascendant, I would be like going by that.
Right. Because like for anyone watching, right, your ascendant's like how you meet the world. It's like the first thing someone is going to see about you. So that is so funny that he doesn't go by it.
Oh, he was like, oh, really? I said, yeah. I said, really? Look, it's kind of like, I'll have to think about this. I was like, this is cool. This is what you should go by, Well, I mean, like, that's just my opinion. I think he should, but he can do whatever he wants, but it is cool.
And I mean, who has their name on their ascendant? Like, I'm sure this is not a very common thing.
No, it's not something that I have personally seen very often. No. So when it was like, I was like, damn. So yeah, but you can totally use it in this kind of context with your own chart. Like I don't know if you're like him and you have different names that you go by or something.
Right. Yeah.
What contacts those names or the name derivatives or what's close to them are in your chart, and maybe go by that. Yeah.
Yeah. The name asteroid thing is just fun anyway. Like, it's fun to see where your name is in your chart and look it up and stuff. And, but I never thought of adding it to synastry. So that's a really nice little trick to see if your name makes any contacts to that person's anything in their chart.
Uh-huh. And then, vice versa on there. And yeah, I think like I was talking to you about earlier, I'm not like, this doesn't make a relationship, right? Like, you want to take everything else into account, but I think that it can be really cool if you've got a really nice looking synastry going on and then you add those names in, and it's like, they're also making conjunctions, lighten things up. It's like, okay, this is nice. I like this.
Totally.
And the other one would be the sun moon midpoint.
Yes.
Not an asteroid. It is a midpoint, but it's a very personal place in your chart. It's the blending of the sun and the moon, the energies of the sun and the moon. So the blending of the yin and the yang, the masculine and the feminine. People that tend to have planets conjunct your sun moon midpoint, they kind of almost activate it in you.
Okay.
So, and I guess again, that depends on everything that's going on, but I think it can be really nice. I have seen it go really, really wonky. I won't lie, I have. But there was also a lot of stuff in the chart that was already kind of wonky. And when I saw this, I was like, ooh.
Right.
But for the most part, it's really, really, really nice when you see somebody's like moon or their Venus or even Mars in some cases light up somebody's sun and midpoint.
So then when you say it would activate it for them, is it going to activate like a combination of their sun and moon? Is it going to activate the sign or the house that the midpoint is in?
It'll activate that blending, that natural blending of the sun and the moon.
Oh, okay.
Not necessarily the sun or the moon, but the blending of them.
Okay. Interesting.
It'll kind of light that up. And yes, I would think that it would light up the house, like in house overlays, absolutely would light that up. And then the sign, yes.
So it'll make them feel more like their sun and the moon when they're with this person?
Or they might feel more complete.
Oh, okay.
Like, because we've got both sides of our, right? We've got both masculine and feminine in us. And to deny one or the other can leave us feeling incomplete. And so having something touch this place where they blend, it can make us feel more complete.
Totally. Do you use the sun moon midpoint as a transit to watch for relationships as well?
You can, yes. And I would also use this as watching this point in the chart, just in general, transit wise, like even just in a natal chart.
Yes.
But yeah, for relationships too, it can. Especially if let's say you've got like a transit to the sun moon midpoint and there's also something going on with the planetary ruler of the sun moon midpoint. Yes, absolutely.
For relationships, you're saying?
For relationships, yes. Or for
anything.
Really anything.
Yeah.
But yes, because the sun moon midpoint is relationship, there is a relationship quality to it just the relationship between the sun and the moon, right?
Right. Because like you said, it's like that blend of the masculine and feminine, which, regardless of what gender we have, that's
Yes.
still that quality of those two sides, those two polarities meeting is a huge part of what a relationship is, right?
Yes, exactly. So it can deal with relationship with self or with other people. So yeah, but yeah, definitely watch transits to it.
Definitely. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Transits to the sun moon midpoint can be very, they can just be very specific, right? Very, I feel like it's almost like a planet in the sense, like a personal planet in that sense, just in the sense of how powerful like an outer planet transit can be.
Oh yeah. Oh yes. Yes, I agree.
Totally. Yeah. Okay. And so there's a couple more, not asteroid related things I wanted to bring up. And you can chime in if you have thoughts on them too. One
Okay.
is the vertex, which is one I always am going to look at in synastry. And even is another one that I'll use for timing of relationships. Now, when something hits your vertex, it's not always going to be a relationship, but sometimes it can be. These can be like really big faded experiences. And then like someone's vertex being on top of a planet or something, I think that's also like another sort of like a confirmation, just like everything else you said, where like just by itself, if nothing else is happening, none of these things really are like traffic stopping things. But when it's in addition to good synastry, good compatibility, other points that we see, oftentimes it's going to be like that, where a chart is just going to have several of these indicators. And the vertex is no joke because it really does tend to represent like faded experiences or major shifts, major changes. It's not always good changes. Sometimes they're challenging. And I can say that one from experience that like I think the first time Jupiter hit my vertex was actually when my first kiss died when I was like 12. And so it was not like, that was not a fun transit for me at all, but it definitely changed the course of my life having that experience. So, I mean, these are some of the things. Now, fate can also be good, so I don't want to scare everyone, but we just don't know. Even as an astrologer, we don't always know whether that fated thing is going to be, good or bad. So I don't like to hype everything up because, I don't want people to go be like, oh, it's the best thing ever. It's my vertex. And then like something comes crashing down.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that. Not wanting to make then you'll get, well, you said it was going to be like this.
Totally.
Like, oh. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. Do you work with the anti-vertex?
I haven't, but why don't you tell everyone what it means or what it's about?
It's on the opposite end of the axis, right? From where the vertex is.
Okay.
The vertex is more like relationship related, whereas the anti-vertex is more self-related. I've actually seen people refer to this as like a secondary ascendant descendant thing.
Okay.
I don't know how I feel about that, but I can see where they're going with it, right? Like there's nothing that's actually the ascendant descendant, but the ascendant descendant.
Totally.
But I can see where they're going with it. I've also kind of thought of like the vertex is like things that are faded, right? Like things that kind of come out of nowhere and they feel faded. The anti-vertex is those things, they also feel faded, but in retrospect, they make a whole lot more sense.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. I think that reminds me of Neptune. I feel like just everything with Neptune, you're not going to be able to figure this out until later.
Yeah, I could see that with Neptune. I could see that. But yeah, that's kind of always what I've always kind of thought about the anti-vertex. And I find it that fits like transits to it that I've had to it. Like at the time, they may have felt really like, whoa, but then I look back and I'm like, no, that made a whole lot of sense. That really wasn't so out of the blue as it, you know what I mean?
Okay. So like things you learn over time as like you learn more about yourself and introspect and that kind of thing.
Yeah. They don't seem quite as, they're still faded, but they don't feel so out of the blue anymore.
Okay.
Whereas stuff to the vertex tends to still feel out of the blue, even in retrospect, or that's been my experience anyway.
Yeah, I do think with the vertex, you don't usually see it coming, and it's like, it's like a somehow pivotal usually for most
Yes.
people.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then another one that I wanted to bring up that is not an asteroid for relationships is the nodes, because those are huge
Mhm.
in, when we see contacts to the south node or the north node, and I always think of like, if something is on someone's south node, oftentimes it's not always bad, right? Because people think south node bad, but I don't think so. I think it's when you feel like you recognize that energy in that person.
Mhm.
It's something familiar that you've already lived out in a past life. So when you see it in that person, it's like,
Comfortable.
whoa, a lot of people will feel like this is a past life connection when the person's anything, is on their south node, because it just brings up that memory. And I think even to the north node is still significant, because it's like, always think of it like, that aspect of the person, the planet that's on the north node, is like helping the other person kind of vibrationally attune to their purpose, but no one's trying to. It's just a part of that person naturally that sort of might help you in some way to align with the energy of your north node, which can be something obvious, like do something in your career, or it can be something a little bit more subtle, like, if your north node is in Taurus, they help you relax, and
Mhm.
take it easy. Or if your north node is in Aries, they help you have confidence, or, on and on. So I always think of those points to the nodes being super, super significant.
Mhm. Yeah, no, yeah, I agree. And even and even like if you like planetary conjunctions with like the planetary ruler of somebody's south node and another planet too. I mean, that can just like amplify the familiarity or the comfortability or what have you.
Right, that totally makes sense. Do you think that it means they knew each other in a past life, or do you think it's more like they just recognize that energy signature?
That's a good question because sometimes I think it does. Sometimes I think it does mean they knew one another in a past life, and sometimes I think it doesn't. They just recognize it. For that, and I usually will say this, I go off of my own personal intuition on it. And I'll say that in a reading, I'll be like, look, this isn't, I'm telling you the astrology. This is my personal feeling about this. But I think it can. I think it can, especially if we're talking also about not just contacts like the South Node and the planetary rulers. Let's say you've also got contacts to Pluto.
Yeah.
Right. So let's add that in. And let's say Pluto's not in Scorpio, but Pluto, so Pluto's in a different site. So the planetary ruler of Pluto, you've got contacts to that too. That would feel pretty hot to me as far as, you know what I mean? If you've got,
Totally.
but just one South Node contact, like the South Node conjunct something, maybe not necessarily just that. Though I do think that if you're in a pivotal relationship or a very important relationship with somebody, I do, this is just my personal opinion, I do think that we oftentimes come around again with the same people. We just might come around in different characters, in different contexts, in different relationships. So if you've got a really pivotal relationship in your life and you happen to have all of these contacts to things, I might be inclined to think that, yeah, you might have known one another before. Though I don't think that you have to have contacts like that to have known one another before either. Does that sounds confusing?
No, it does. It makes sense, because I think there's this tendency to want to kind of simplify this stuff and be like, okay, South Node conjunction means past lives always. And it's like everything with astrology it depends on everything else in the chart. And that's true for whatever we're talking about. And I think this is something that's hard for people who aren't astrologers to kind of wrap their head around, because, one of the things I learned really early on is if you see something 3 times in a chart, then you can consider it true. Only then can you consider it true. It's not like you see one thing and you decide that person is that, right? You need to look at, and just like you've been saying, you always say this too. And I feel like I can't say this enough, that like it totally depends on everything else. And when it comes to like past lives and fate, I don't want to play with someone else's like destiny, and so that's one of the things that I'm really I try not to just jump right into like, this was a past life, blah, blah, blah. Because even if maybe it was, I want to guide that person to their own truth about the situation. I don't want to be the authority that
Yes.
says, this is what I determined your love life to be. Like
Yes.
that's too
Yeah.
much. And so I'm always going to try to, support the person in seeing what these mean without over interpreting it. And then, sometimes I'm curious how you handle this. Sometimes clients, they'll book a synastry reading because they just want to know all the good stuff. And so this can be really challenging as an astrologer because I'm going to say if it looks negative, I'm going to say that. And then sometimes the client doesn't really want that information. And so how do you handle that as an astrologer? Do you try to like what do you do? How do you deal with that kind of stuff?
Well, okay. So usually, and I know I'm sure you've got email correspondence with people before you actually speak to them, or do they just book?
Oftentimes mine is set up so they can just book with me.
Okay. I'm actually about to get a system like that, which while I'm really looking forward to it, there's a part of me that's a little bit, because what I do is people have to, they can buy the readings on my site, but they'll generally email me and let me know that they bought it. Right. So I kind of talk to them. I get a vibe for kind of how they seem. Do they seem like they're a little more sensitive? Do they seem like they are more blunt? You know what I mean? Like you can kind of get a feel for somebody. And I think to myself, okay, so I'm looking at your synastry and it looks really effed, right? Like just, I mean, not that everything is completely that, but it just looks hard. It looks difficult. And I'm like, okay, so if this is the blunt person, I can be
right. If
this is the sensitive person, I will still give them the truth, but I will deliver it with some sugar going down.
Totally.
Something, not that it's not true. It's all true. I'm not going to lie to anybody, but I will deliver it in a less blunt way, or in a more stomachable way.
Mm-hmm. Totally.
But I want to make sure that I get across and that can almost be harder because, you're wanting to get across, make sure that you're not making it sound better than it actually is. You just want the delivery of it to be, you know what I mean?
Right. Well, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll say like worst case scenario, this could be like this. Best case scenario, it could be this. And if I saw this, I'll use the language of like, if I saw this in synastry, I would make sure this person isn't lying to me, or whatever. That's one that's really hard with it when it's Neptune, because like, how do you tell someone like this might all be an illusion? It's like, it's like really finding the way to say that in a kind and loving way, and trust that like, first of all, it could also be healing if it's Neptune, right? So it may not express in the worst possible way, but then to be able to like just be in integrity with how there are challenges.
There are. Yeah. You want to make sure that anything, especially if you are dealing with a client that is more sensitive and that they are more sensitive and that you don't want to hurt them or make them feel like shit. You want them to walk away feeling good about the experience, even if the reading itself isn't completely positive.
Exactly.
So you want them to feel good about the overall experience that they have. And yeah, it is. It is difficult. It is a difficult line to walk. And you also don't want to do more damage, right? Or do any
harm. Like, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we're not doctors, but I kind of think of the first do no harm kind of.
Totally.
in my practice, because I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to make anybody's trauma worse, or I don't want to be a traumatic experience for anybody. You know what I mean? But yeah, it's difficult. It is difficult. Do you tend to go also with your intuition on that kind of thing?
It depends on what it is and how, like, if it's something that like could change the course of someone's life, I'll just be like, I'm not totally positive on this, just because even if I feel like something's right, unless it's something I've seen in several charts and validated, I will defer to, this could be this or it could be that often. But usually, 9 times out of 10, when I tell someone about a negative aspect, they're going to say, oh my God, that's exactly how it feels. Right.
Yeah.
So because I do readings with people over Zoom and I'm talking to them, it's okay, you know, and then if they're going to argue that it's not that way, okay, you know, I gave them what I had and maybe they're right and maybe it's not that way and that's fine. But, you know, it is something that as astrologers, it just ties into like the ethics of astrology, which isn't necessarily all universal, right? Like we all have a different moral compass of how much we feel like we can like call out a client and stuff. And I know that you're on the side of not forcing, which is one of the things that kind of drew me to you. And that's, you know, that's also how I read as well. Maybe it's my Virgo rising where I'm like, I'm just here to be of service to you and like deliver some information to you humbly and just tell you what I see. And then, you know, trust that the person can use it however is right for them. Like it's not my job to make someone see something that I see. That's never, but I also am like, not gonna lie if I see something that isn't looking good. But and usually it is reassuring to the person if it's really true, if it's really accurate and it's bad. At some point they're going to see that and they're going to know. And so that's another thing I try to remember is like, maybe it's not going to help them in this moment while they're with me, but maybe they'll take that with them. And then if that red flag does happen 6 months in the future, they'll remember that experience. And maybe, you know, maybe that will be helpful.
That you bring up a good, I did a synastry reading for, somebody, it was years ago now, but the synastry, there were things about it that I remember kind of recoiling at it. And I remember thinking, okay, how am I going to put this in a way that where it's not like forceful, but I want to get my point across because it really did. There were things about it that bothered me. And I let her know. I said, you know, I said, you want to watch for some of these things. I said, you may not see them now. I said, hopefully you never see them. You know, I hope you never do. But keep an eye out for these few things. And I don't think she was real thrilled with me at the time. I don't think she was. I was nice about my delivery, but I don't think that she was real thrilled about it at the time. And I got an email about, I don't know, was it 6 months later that those things had started coming up and that she left. And I was like, good for you. Because I remember thinking those things were only going to get worse. You know what I mean? But I'm thinking to myself, perhaps I do wonder if maybe if she hadn't had the reading, right, would she have left that fast? Or would she have waited to see if those you know what I mean? Right. Because they were serious red flags. They were you know, I won't go into too many, but they were serious things that you don't want to, no. You don't want to, you know, you don't want this kind of going on in a relationship that you're in. And, but definitely taking an approach where it might not benefit them at the time, or they may not take it in at the time, but down the line, that does happen too. Mm-hmm. Well, and I think maybe the takeaway for people listening is if you book a synastry reading, make sure you want to know if that person is really compatible with you, because your astrologer is not going to want to lie to you if you're in that stage, which we all sometimes go through, you know, where we just want to believe that the person is as wonderful as we think they are. You know, if you're only looking for yes, this relationship is guaranteed to work, that's probably not the space to be in, right? When you want to book a synastry or, you know, a relationship reading, because we're going to see everything in the chart. We're going to see all the good things and all the things that draw you to them. And then we're going to see all the potential problems, and we're not going to want to avoid that stuff. So, I think that might be the moral of the story. I think you might be right about that, because I mean, if you're not, and I guess, you know, if you really only wanted to hear the good stuff, I mean, if I had a client that was like, I only want to hear the good stuff, I might be thinking, okay, well, first of all, why do you only want to hear the like that's not real. Only good stuff is reality. But I might appease that. I don't know. I don't think that's as beneficial though. There is a balance. In synastry, there's going to be some negative stuff, some positive stuff. There's not a synastry that's freaking perfect. That just doesn't exist.
Well, and I think that in spirituality, you can tune in to a certain person you follow who is going to have that more like positive, message when you're having a bad day and you just needed to be uplifted.
Uh-huh.
But with astrology, it's not quite like that because, for us to only tell you the good stuff when we're seeing negative stuff, it's not really going to benefit anyone. So
no, it's not.
And that's one thing I think people maybe don't know about astrology versus other types of like spiritual information is that, I try to be so honest on my videos that people know they're going to get all their problems spoken to them out loud in a way, kind of, right? But that's not a really good, solid astrologer is probably not going to serve that purpose, right? There's other spiritual stuff people can tune into if they just want an upliftment.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree with that. Yeah. I do agree with that because not everything. I mean, the synastry shouldn't be overwhelmingly bad, but it's not all positive. It's not a very realistic way of looking at synastry or relationships in general to only want to hear about the positive.
Totally. Well, I think we'll go ahead and leave it there for today. Thank you so much for coming and just sharing with us about asteroids and just all your knowledge, like always. Do you want to tell people, remind them again where they can find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. I am at saturnseason.com online. That's my website. And you can find me YouTube. It's Let's F with Astrology. And is there, and the subreddit, Let's Fuck with Astrology. It's actually spelled out there. But I think that's everything.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming, and make sure you go follow her, you guys, on her YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button and hit the bell so you get notified. She has tons of videos always coming out on all this stuff and more. And thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Bye, y'all.